The crystalline sands of Viridis 9 glittered under the triple suns, casting rainbow prisms across the massive arena that dominated the capital city's skyline. 50,000 spectators from 17 worlds filled the tiered seats, their excited chatter creating a hum that resonated through the structure's living crystal foundations. In the diplomatic observation box, Chancellor Ordus adjusted his ceremonial collar nervously, aware that the fate of his world's standing in the Galactic Coalition hung on the outcome of today's duel. "You understand what's at stake here, Terran?" Ordus asked, his voice betraying the strain of a leader whose political future balanced on a knife's edge. Marcus Vale, Earth's reluctant champion, gazed down at the arena floor where workers were completing the final preparations. He traced a finger along the edge of his combat uniform, a simple design that looked woefully inadequate compared to the elaborate battlesuits worn by other competitors. "The Alliance Treaty. Either Earth proves its worth through combat, or we remain a probationary member with limited voting rights for another decade." Marcus's voice was steady, betraying none of the apprehension churning within him. "I understand perfectly, Chancellor." Ordus nodded, the jewels embedded in his ridged forehead catching the light. "Then you also understand that your opponent has never lost a formal duel. 17 victories, 7 deaths. She has made particularly pointed comments about the inferiority of male combatants." Marcus had seen the broadcasts. Everyone had. Saoirse Corr's victories were legendary across Coalition space, as were her post-match speeches denouncing the weakness of men, particularly those from Earth. Her insults had initially been dismissed as colorful gamesmanship, but as her influence grew, her rhetoric had shaped policy on several worlds, including Viridis 9. Male representatives from Earth had been systematically excluded from key negotiations, relegated to observer status while female diplomats were grudgingly admitted to discussions. Earth's ambassador had filed formal protests. The Coalition Council had proposed a traditional resolution, a ceremonial duel between champions. When Saoirse had immediately accepted, naming herself as Viridis Namiva's representative, Earth's diplomatic corps had fallen into disarray. Several female champions had volunteered, but Saoirse had invoked an ancient bylaw allowing her to specify the nature of her challenger. She demanded a male opponent from Earth, which is how Marcus Vale, cultural attaché and former competitive martial artist, found himself preparing to face the most feared duelist in the sector. "She arrives," Ordus said quietly, gesturing toward the arena's northern entrance. The crowd erupted as Saoirse Corr strode onto the sands. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her lithe frame moved with predatory grace. Her skin held the metallic blue-green sheen common to Viridian natives, contrasting with the crimson battle harness that accentuated her powerful physique. Behind her walked her entourage, trainers, medics, and her legendary mentor, Grand Duelist Karath, whose silver skin marked him as one of the rare male champions on this world. "Marcus Vale," her amplified voice cut through the arena's noise. "Come and face me, if Earth's men have the courage." The Chancellor winced. "She begins early with the provocations." Marcus exhaled slowly, centering himself. "That's fine. She can have the crowd. I just need one opening." "You truly believe you can defeat her?" Ordus asked, surprise evident in his tone. "I believe in preparing properly," Marcus replied, activating his neural link to Aaron Tala, the AI coach that had been analyzing Saoirse's fighting style for weeks. "Ready?" he subvocalized. "Always," came the immediate response in his mind. Her pre-fight ritual follows the same pattern. She's building her adrenal response while attempting to provoke an emotional reaction from you. Classic intimidation tactics. Marcus nodded imperceptibly. "Time to make my entrance, Chancellor." He stepped toward the platform that would lower him to the arena floor. "Vale," Ordus called after him. "Whatever happens, know that some of us appreciate Earth's willingness to answer this challenge. Not all of Viridis shares Saoirse's perspectives." Marcus acknowledged this with a slight bow, then stepped onto the platform. As it began its descent, he heard Saoirse's amplified voice again. I wonder what specimen of male fragility Earth has sent us today. Another soldier who thinks brute force can overcome superior technique? A diplomat who will attempt to talk his way out of defeat? Her laughter echoed across the arena, joined by thousands of voices. The platform reached the ground, and Marcus stepped onto the crystalline sand. Each grain caught the light differently, creating a constantly shifting kaleidoscope beneath his feet. He walked forward, focusing on his breathing, aware of the sudden hush that fell over the crowd as they assessed Earth's champion. This? Saoirse's voice dripped with theatrical disdain. This is Earth's defender. He barely reaches my shoulder. She wasn't wrong. At 6 feet even, Marcus stood significantly shorter than his opponent. His combat suit, a dark blue reinforced fabric with minimal armor plates, looked almost civilian compared to her elaborate battle harness. The Terran male appears to have dressed for a casual exercise session rather than a duel that will determine his world's standing. Saoirse played to the crowd, who responded with appreciative laughter. Perhaps he plans to surrender quickly and spare us all the tedium of watching him fail. Marcus continued his approach until he reached the central circle where the ceremonial introductions would take place. He stood silent, his posture relaxed but alert. Saoirse circled him predatorily. No response. Earthman? Has fear stolen your voice, or do you simply have nothing worthy to say? From the corner of his eye, Marcus could see the betting terminals around the arena lighting up as wagers poured in. The odds displayed were not in his favor, currently showing 15-1 against him. Her heart rate is elevated beyond normal pre-combat levels. Aaron noted in his mind. She's investing more emotional energy than usual. Your silence frustrates her expectations. I was told this was to be a duel, not a speech competition, Marcus finally said, his voice calm and caring across the suddenly quiet arena. But if you prefer to talk rather than fight, I understand. Words can be safer. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Saoirse's eyes narrowed, the vertical pupils contracting to thin slits. You dare suggest I fear combat? Her voice had lost its theatrical quality, taking on a dangerous edge. I suggest nothing. I merely observe that you seem very interested in talking about fighting, while I'm here to actually fight. Marcus maintained his relaxed stance, but his eyes never left hers. The grand duelist Karath stepped forward, his ancient voice rasping through the arena's sound system. The ceremonial introductions will now commence. Champions, approach the circle of intent. Marcus and Saoirse moved to stand on opposite sides of an inlaid silver circle. Between them, a small pedestal rose from the ground, bearing 2 ceremonial daggers. Champions will now declare their intent and take up the blades of commitment, Karath intoned. Saoirse grasped her dagger first, raising it high. I, Saoirse Kaur, stand as champion of Viridis 9 and defender of our traditions. I accept this challenge to prove once more that our ways are superior, that our judgment of Earth's males as inferior warriors is just and right. She pointed the dagger directly at Marcus. When I defeat this man, Earth will acknowledge its proper place in the coalition hierarchy, respectful and subordinate. The crowd roared its approval as she placed the dagger back on the pedestal. Marcus stepped forward and took up the second blade, feeling its perfect balance. I, Marcus Vale, stand as Earth's champion not to prove superiority or dominance, but to demonstrate that respect must flow in all directions for any alliance to thrive. His voice was measured but carried clearly. I seek not to humiliate or destroy my opponent, but to earn mutual respect through honorable combat. A murmur ran through the crowd, confusion mixed with surprise. This was not the defensive or aggressive response they had expected. Fine words, Saoirse said dismissively. We shall see if they survive first contact. Karath raised his hands. The champions have declared. The preliminary assessment will now begin. This was the traditional first phase of a formal duel, a brief, non-lethal exchange allowing opponents to gauge each other before the main combat. Many duels were decided in these opening moments, as psychological advantage was established. Saoirse moved with sudden, explosive speed, closing the distance between them with a spinning leap that brought her practice staff whistling toward Marcus's head. He stepped inside the arc of her swing, redirecting rather than blocking the strike, using minimal movement to let her momentum carry her past him. She recovered instantly, whirling to face him, surprise briefly visible in her expression. "Interesting," she said. "You have some rudimentary training in evasion." Among other things, Marcus maintained his defensive posture, making no aggressive moves. Saoirse attacked again, this time with a series of rapid strikes aimed at different targets: head, knee, sternum. Marcus evaded each one with economic movements, never striking back, but never retreating either. "She's probing your defenses, looking for patterns," Aaron observed. "Notice the slight weight shift before her spin attacks. It's barely perceptible, but consistent." After several more exchanges, Kirath struck a small gong. "The assessment is complete. Champions will retire to prepare for the formal duel, which begins when the great gong sounds." As they moved to their respective preparation areas, Marcus could feel thousands of eyes tracking him. The betting odds had shifted slightly, now 12-1, against him. In the preparation chamber, a cool, humid space beneath the arena, Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed. "You surprised her," Chancellor Ordas said, entering with two aides who carried equipment cases. "She expected either clumsy aggression or fearful defense. She still believes she'll win easily." Marcus replied without opening his eyes. "That's fine." Her fighting style incorporates 17 primary attack patterns. Aaron reported, during the assessment, she revealed only 5. She's holding back her signature techniques. "There's something else you should know," Ordas said hesitantly. "Our intelligence suggests she may employ pheromone traps during the main combat." Marcus opened his eyes. "Is that legal under the duel protocols?" "Unfortunately, yes. Bioenhancement is permitted, and Viridians naturally produce combat pheromones. Saoirse has simply weaponized this natural ability." "Explain." "She can release specific chemical compounds that trigger disorientation in opponents. It's subtle. Most don't realize what's happening until their reactions slow and their judgment falters." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Can your people provide any countermeasures?" Ordas gestured to one of the aides, who opened a case to reveal what looked like a thin silver collar. "This filter will neutralize most of the effect, but it can't block everything without being obvious. And if she realizes you're protected, she'll claim Earth is cheating and use it to invalidate the duel regardless of outcome." Marcus finished. "No, we do this cleanly." He closed his eyes again. "Aaron, adjust for potential neurochemical interference patterns." "Compensating." The AI confirmed. "We've studied recordings of her previous 17 duels extensively. There's a pattern to when she employs these tactics, typically just before executing her finishing sequence." The distant sound of the crowd grew louder as the main event approached. Marcus could hear announcers discussing the upcoming duel, recounting Saoirse's impressive record and speculating on how quickly she would dispatch the Terran challenger. "What made you volunteer for this?" Ordas asked suddenly. "You must have known the odds." Marcus opened his eyes. "I didn't volunteer. I was selected." "But you accepted?" "Yes." "Why?" Marcus stood, stretching methodically. "Because someone had to. Because the way Saoirse speaks about Earth, about men, it's not just gamesmanship anymore. It's becoming policy. Worlds are limiting Earth's participation based on her rhetoric. And you believe you can change that with one duel? I believe that someone needs to stand up to bullies, whatever form they take." Marcus checked his combat suit's seals. "And I believe in preparation." The first resonant tone of the great gong vibrated through the chamber. "It's time," Ordas said. Marcus nodded. "One more thing, Chancellor. Regardless of the outcome today, remember that a single combat doesn't define a people, either hers or mine." The Chancellor looked at him curiously. "For someone who claims not to be a diplomat, you have an unusually nuanced perspective." "I contain multitudes," Marcus said with a slight smile. Then he turned and walked toward the arena entrance, the second gong tone vibrating through his bones. The roar of the crowd hit him like a physical force as he emerged onto the sands. Across the arena, Saoirse Kaur made her entrance, her battle harness now augmented with ceremonial spikes that caught the light with every movement. She carried her dueling staff, a 6-foot length of densified crystalline material that could shift from flexible to rigid based on the wielder's neural commands. Marcus carried no weapon. In formal duels, combatants could choose their armament, or none at all. They approached the central circle again, where Kirath awaited them. The ancient duelist looked between them, his silver skin reflecting the arena's lights. "Champions, stand ready," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "This duel will continue until submission, incapacitation, or—" He paused significantly. "Other resolution." Everyone understood the implication. Death was a permitted outcome in formal duels, though increasingly rare in modern times. Saoirse Kaur has selected the crystal staff as her weapon. Kirath continued. Marcus Vale has selected no weapon. This announcement caused a stir among the spectators. Fighting unarmed against Saoirse's staff was considered either suicidal or arrogant. "Champions, take your positions." They moved to opposite sides of the circle. Marcus settled into a relaxed stance, hands open at his sides. Saoirse twirled her staff in a complex pattern, the weapon humming as it cut through the air. "No weapon, Terran? Is this some pathetic attempt at gaining sympathy?" "I have what I need," Marcus replied simply. The third and final gong sounded, its deep resonance washing over the arena. Before its vibration had faded, Saoirse attacked. She moved with astonishing speed, her staff becoming a blur as she executed a series of strikes that would have overwhelmed most opponents in seconds. Marcus evaded rather than blocked, using minimal movements to let the attacks pass within millimeters of his body. "She's establishing her dominant pattern," Aaron noted, standard opening sequence designed to force defensive reactions. The crowd's excitement built as the exchange continued. Saoirse's attacks grew more elaborate, more aggressive, her staff shifting from rigid to flexible and back in mid-strike, creating attacks that seemed to curve around Marcus's defenses. Still, he avoided direct contact, moving with fluid precision that kept him just beyond the staff's reach. He made no offensive moves, content to let Saoirse expend energy while he studied her patterns. "Fight back, coward!" she snarled after a particularly complex sequence failed to connect. "Or do Earthmen only know how to run?" Marcus said nothing, maintaining his focus as he continued to evade. He could sense her frustration building, feel the subtle shift in the crowd's mood from anticipation of a quick victory to uncertainty. 5 minutes passed. 10. Saoirse's attacks continued unabated, but Marcus noted the microscopic tells that Aaron had identified: the fractional hesitation before certain combinations, the slight adjustment of grip that telegraphed direction changes. "She's preparing to employ the pheromone trap," Aaron warned, respiratory pattern changing, sweat chemistry altering. Marcus had been waiting for this. As Saoirse executed a spinning attack, he detected the faintest sweet scent in the air around him. Immediately, he felt a slight disorientation, a momentary dulling of his reflexes. Compensating, Aaron responded, adjusting the neural signals to account for the chemical interference. She'll follow with her signature finishing sequence, the spiral descent. 27% of her victories end with this combination. Sure enough, Saoirse launched into an elaborate series of spinning strikes, her staff becoming almost invisible as it cut through the air from multiple angles simultaneously. It was a devastating technique that had overwhelmed many skilled opponents, a combination of speed, power, and misdirection that seemed impossible to counter. For the first time in the duel, Marcus didn't evade. Instead, he stepped directly into the attack pattern. The crowd gasped collectively. Even Saoirse's eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever willingly moved into the spiral descent before. But Marcus had identified what Aaron had shown him in countless analysis sessions: the single micro telltale in Saoirse's footwork, the momentary placement of her left foot that created the fulcrum for her entire spinning sequence. As she planted that foot, Marcus executed a perfectly timed feint, moving as if to retreat before suddenly shifting direction. The unexpected movement caused Saoirse to adjust her weight distribution by a fraction. In that millisecond of imbalance, Marcus struck, not with a punch or kick, but with a simple redirect of her momentum. His hand barely seemed to touch her staff, but the contact was precisely calculated to amplify the force of her own movement. The staff's trajectory altered by mere centimeters, but it was enough to completely disrupt her sequence. Saoirse tried to compensate, but the adjustment came too late. Her own momentum, her own power, betrayed her. She stumbled forward, off balance for the first time in the duel. Marcus moved like water, flowing around her destabilized form. One hand gently guided her continued forward motion, while the other swept her supporting leg. It was not a forceful takedown. It didn't need to be. Physics completed what technique had begun. Saoirse Kaur, undefeated champion of Viridis 9, crashed to the crystalline sand, her staff flying from her grasp. Before she could recover, Marcus had secured her in a simple control position, applying pressure to specific nerve points that immobilized without causing pain. The arena fell silent. 50,000 spectators held their breath as the implications of what they had just witnessed sank in. Marcus held the position for 3 seconds, long enough to demonstrate complete control, then released Saoirse and stepped back, hands open at his sides once more. Under the rules of formal duels, he now had the right to claim victory by either demanding submission or applying a finishing strike. He did neither. Instead, he extended his hand to the fallen champion. Saoirse stared at the offered hand in disbelief, then at Marcus. "Finish it," she hissed, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Take your victory." "I already have," he replied quietly. "The choice now is whether we both lose or both win." Confusion crossed her features. "What are you talking about?" "This was never about defeating you. It was about earning respect, not taking it." Her eyes narrowed. "So this is some kind of moral lesson? You think your mercy makes you superior?" "No. I think treating each other as equals makes us both stronger." His hand remained extended. "The Alliance needs Viridis 9 as much as it needs Earth. But it needs us working together, not struggling for dominance." A murmur began to spread through the crowd as the standoff continued. From the ceremonial dais, Karath watched intently, his ancient eyes revealing nothing. Finally, Saoirse grasped Marcus's hand and allowed him to help her to her feet. The murmur in the crowd grew louder, punctuated by scattered applause that quickly spread. Karath approached, raising his ceremonial staff. "The duel is concluded. By the ancient laws of Viridis 9, the right of victory declaration belongs to Marcus Vale of Earth." All eyes turned to Marcus. This was the moment when victors traditionally proclaimed their superiority and demanded concessions from the defeated. The political implications would resonate throughout the coalition. Marcus looked around the arena, meeting the expectant gazes of dignitaries from 17 worlds. Then he turned to face Saoirse directly. "I declare that this victory belongs not to Earth alone, but to the principle that true strength lies in mutual respect." His voice carried clearly across the now silent arena. Saoirse Kaur fought with honor and skill. The difference between us today was not gender or species or world of origin. It was simply that I had the advantage of studying her techniques, while she had never seen mine. He turned to address the wider audience. "If the coalition is to thrive, we must move beyond hierarchies of domination. Earth does not seek to rule or to submit. We seek to partner, to contribute our strengths and learn from others." A section of the crowd began to applaud, primarily delegates from the more progressive coalition worlds. Others remained silent, their traditional values challenged by this unexpected turn. "Pretty words," Saoirse said, her voice amplified for all to hear. "But they changed nothing about the realities of power. You won by exploiting a weakness, as is the way of combat. I won by understanding your strength and working with it rather than against it," Marcus countered. the same principle applies to alliances between worlds. The grand duelist Karath stepped forward. By our traditions, the victor may claim a prize of the defeated. What do you claim, Marcus Vale of Earth? This was the moment many had been waiting for, the traditional claiming of tribute, often in the form of valuable technologies, political concessions, or in more ancient times, personal servitude. I claim only this. Marcus said that in future negotiations, representatives of all coalition worlds be judged by their merits rather than their gender or planet of origin. A collective intake of breath swept through the arena. It was a masterful diplomatic move, framed as a modest request, but with far-reaching implications for coalition politics. Karath turned to Saoirse. The claim is made. By tradition, you must acknowledge. Saoirse stood straight, her proud bearing undiminished despite her defeat. For a long moment, she stared at Marcus, her expression unreadable. Then, with a formality that bordered on stiffness, she inclined her head. I acknowledge the claim, she said. Let it be as the victor requests. The ceremony concluded shortly afterward, with Karath pronouncing the duel officially resolved and the claim registered in coalition records. As the crowd began to disperse, discussions of the unexpected outcome already spreading across communication channels, Marcus found himself approached by Chancellor Ordas. Remarkable, the Chancellor said, genuine amazement in his voice. Not just the victory, but what you did with it afterward. The political landscape has shifted significantly in the space of an hour. For better or worse, Marcus asked. That remains to be seen. Some traditionalists are already calling it a humiliation, claiming you denied Saoirse the dignity of a proper defeat. And others? Ordas's jeweled ridges caught the light as he tilted his head thoughtfully. Others are seeing it as the dawn of a new approach to coalition politics. The smaller worlds, especially, appreciate the precedent you've established. Marcus nodded, his attention drawn to a figure approaching from across the arena floor. Saoirse Kaur had changed from her battle harness into formal diplomatic attire, though she still moved with the fluid grace of a warrior. Chancellor, she acknowledged Ordas with a slight nod before focusing on Marcus. I would speak with Earth's champion privately. Ordas glanced at Marcus, who nodded his assent. The Chancellor withdrew discreetly, leaving the two former opponents alone in the now empty arena. That was not how duels traditionally conclude on Viridis Nines, Saoirse said without preamble. I'm not from Viridis 9, Marcus replied simply. Clearly. A hint of her earlier disdain colored the word, but it lacked the genuine contempt of before. Your technique, I've never encountered anything like it. What do you call it? It doesn't have a specific name. It's an integration of several Earth disciplines focused on energy efficiency and redirection. You used my own strength against me. I worked with it rather than against it, he corrected gently. There's a difference. She studied him, her vertical pupils dilating slightly. You could have humiliated me, demanded significant concessions. Instead, you. She seemed to struggle for the right words. You transformed the victory into something else entirely. Was that disappointing? It was. Unexpected. She began to pace, her movements revealing the restless energy of someone whose fundamental assumptions had been challenged. In 17 duels, I have either crushed my opponents completely or, in rare cases, been magnanimous in victory. I never considered how to respond to someone else's magnanimity. Perhaps because you never truly expected to lose, Marcus suggested. She stopped pacing and faced him directly. Do you know why I have been so vocal about the weakness of male combatants, particularly from Earth? I have theories. Share them. Marcus considered his words carefully. Initially, it was likely tactical, psychological warfare to destabilize opponents before combat. But as your victories accumulated, it became political. Your personal combat philosophy expanded into a broader social agenda. And why would I do that? Because Viridis Nine's traditional power structures were already aligned with your perspective. By championing those structures, you gained influence beyond the arena. He paused. And perhaps because at some point, you began to genuinely believe it. Saoirse's expression remained neutral, but a subtle tension in her posture suggested he had struck close to truth. Your defeat of me today will be explained away, she said finally. Anomalies occur. Records show that even the greatest champions occasionally fall. Is that what you believe, that today was an anomaly? She was silent for a moment. I don't know what to believe anymore. My entire life has been built around a specific understanding of strength, of superiority. You didn't just defeat me physically, you challenged the philosophy that has defined my career. That wasn't my intent. Wasn't it? Her gaze was penetrating. You claimed to seek partnership, not dominance, yet you fundamentally undermined my standing in a single hour. I sought to earn respect, not to diminish yours. Marcus said, the coalition needs strong voices from all worlds, including yours. But strength that depends on diminishing others is ultimately self-defeating. Pretty philosophy, she said, but without her earlier mockery. So what happens now? Marcus Vale of Earth. You return home a hero, having humbled the arrogant Saoirse Core. I return home having done my duty as Earth's representative. What happens next depends partly on you. Explain. The Coalition Summit begins tomorrow. Earth's delegation will include men and women, as it always has. The question is whether Viridis Nai will finally engage with all of our representatives equally. Saoirse's jaw tightened. You think one duel changes generations of tradition? No. But it creates an opening, a moment when change becomes possible. He held her gaze steadily. The choice is yours, Champion Core. You can treat today as an anomaly to be explained away, or as the beginning of a new understanding. She did not respond immediately, her internal conflict visible in the subtle play of expressions across her features. Finally, she straightened. Decision made. The Viridian delegation will receive Earth's representatives according to diplomatic protocol, without previous restrictions. The words seemed to cost her some effort. Beyond that, we shall see. She turned to leave, then paused. One more question. Taryn, when you had me pinned, that control technique, you could have applied significantly more pressure. Why didn't you? Because the goal was to demonstrate control, not to cause pain. But in a real combat situation, that was a real combat situation, he interrupted gently. And the level of force matched the objective. Anything more would have been inefficient. A flash of understanding crossed her features. Efficiency. Yes, I begin to see the philosophy behind your technique. She inclined her head in a gesture that was not quite a bow, but conveyed a new level of respect. Until tomorrow, Marcus Vale. As she walked away, Marcus felt the tension he'd been carrying for weeks finally begin to release. He touched his neural link. Thank you for your help, Aaron. My analysis only provided information. The AI responded. The execution was entirely your own, as was the decision about how to use your victory. Still, I couldn't have done it without your insights. Partnership, Aaron noted with what seemed like approval. Precisely the principle you advocated. Marcus smiled slightly as he made his way toward the exit where Chancellor Urdaz waited. Already, he could see diplomatic aides hurrying across the arena complex, no doubt carrying news and revised strategies to their respective delegations. The political landscape had indeed shifted, though the full implications would take time to emerge. The Earth delegation has already received 17 requests for meetings. Urdaz informed him as they walked together toward the diplomatic quarter, including 3 from worlds that previously refused to engage with male representatives. That's a start, Marcus said. A significant one, but Saoirse still wields considerable influence. If she chooses to frame today's outcome as an aberration, she won't, Marcus said with quiet confidence. You seem very certain. I saw something in her eyes at the end. Recognition, understanding. She's too intelligent to ignore what happened today, even if it challenges her worldview. Ordaz looked skeptical. People don't change their fundamental beliefs easily, especially when those beliefs are reinforced by cultural tradition. True, but sometimes all it takes is a crack in the foundation, a single experience that doesn't fit the existing pattern. Marcus smiled slightly. Besides, Saoirse Kaur didn't become a champion by ignoring reality. She'll adapt because that's what survivors do. I hope you're right, Ordaz said, for all our sakes. The diplomatic quarter bustled with activity as delegations prepared for the summit that would formally begin the next day. News of the duel's outcome had spread rapidly, creating a buzz of speculation and reassessment. Marcus noted with satisfaction that several male Earth diplomats who had been sidelined in previous negotiations were now being actively engaged by representatives from traditionally conservative worlds. In his quarters that evening, Marcus received a message from Ambassador Alana Park, head of Earth's delegation. Congratulations, Marcus, she said, her holographic image displaying a rare smile. Your handling of the duel and its aftermath has created significant opportunities. The Coalition Council has specifically requested your presence at tomorrow's opening session. In what capacity? Marcus asked, surprised. Cultural attachés rarely attended high-level sessions. As Earth's official representative to the new Military Cooperation Committee being formed to address the Outer Rim situation, Marcus blinked in surprise. That's unexpected. Is it? The ambassador's expression was knowing. You demonstrated not just combat prowess today, but diplomatic skill. Several key coalition members were impressed by your approach. Including Viridis 9? Interestingly, yes. We've received formal notification that Grand Duelist Karath will serve as their representative on the committee. Marcus absorbed this information thoughtfully. Karath was revered not just as a warrior, but as a strategic thinker. His appointment suggested that Viridis 9 was taking the committee seriously. There's more, Ambassador Park continued. The notification included a personal addendum from Saoirse Kaur, indicating her willingness to serve as Karath's second. Apparently, she's particularly interested in exploring what she called efficiency-focused combat philosophies in coalition military training. A smile spread slowly across Marcus's face. Adaptation begins, he murmured. Indeed. The ambassador's image flickered as she reached for something off-screen. Get some rest, Marcus. Tomorrow promises to be interesting. After the ambassador's image faded, Marcus stood by the window of his quarters, looking out over the crystalline spires of the Viridian capital. In the fading light of the triple sunset, the buildings shimmered with internal luminescence, like massive gemstones rising from the desert. Impressive view, Aaron commented through their link. It is, Marcus agreed, a remarkable civilization. With remarkable potential, if they can move beyond limiting traditions. That's true of all of us, isn't it? Marcus thought as he watched diplomatic shuttles crisscrossing the darkening sky. Progress doesn't come from clinging to old certainties, but from being willing to consider new possibilities. Philosophical tonight, Aaron observed with a touch of humor. The after effect of victory? No, Marcus replied, turning from the window. The recognition of beginning. The following morning, as Marcus prepared for the summit's opening session, he received a small package. Inside was a miniature crystal staff, a perfect replica of Saoirse's weapon, but sized to fit a human hand. A note accompanied it, written in the flowing script of Viridian formal communication. To understand an opponent's strength is the beginning of wisdom. To respect it is the foundation of true alliance. Isisitisi. Marcus smiled as he placed the miniature staff carefully in his diplomatic case. The journey ahead would not be easy. Generations of tradition and prejudice would not dissolve overnight. But a door had been opened, a possibility created. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. In the Great Coalition Chamber, representatives from 17 worlds gathered beneath the soaring crystalline dome. As Marcus took his place among Earth's delegation, he caught sight of Saoirse Kaur entering with the Viridian contingent. Their eyes met briefly across the chamber. She inclined her head in that not-quite bow he had seen before, a gesture now of acknowledgement between equals. He returned the gesture, sensing that they had both crossed a threshold, one that would reshape not just their own worlds, but potentially the future of the coalition itself. As the coalition chair called the summit to order, Marcus settled into his seat, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Yesterday had been about combat. Today would be about collaboration. Different arenas, but in many ways, the same fundamental principle. True strength didn't come from dominating others, but from finding the balance point where all could contribute their unique powers to a greater whole. It was a lesson Earth had learned through its own difficult history. Now, perhaps, it was one the coalition was ready to embrace as well. The crystal staff in his diplomatic case caught the light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across his notes, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statement wasn't claiming victory, but extending a hand afterward. And sometimes, the most important battle wasn't the one fought in an arena, but the one fought in hearts and minds as old certainties gave way to new understandings. That battle was just beginning.